Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. So, that's it. After 23 race weekends and exactly 1,500 racing laps, we entered the Abu Dhabi race weekend with 3 drivers in contention for the World Championship crown, and we emerged with 1 champion. It was Lando Norris clinching his first championship title by a slender 2 points, ahead of a charging Max Verstappen. So this is the Abu Dhabi race review. I am joined once again by co-host Lucy and 2 returning guests, Bilal and Alex. Thank you guys for coming with me. Once again, I just kind of want to start off where we always do by getting your opinions on the race and kind of the events that unfolded throughout. So, Bilal, what was your opinion of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
I was so excited up until the race. It was a three-way battle going into the race, and I was like, it's going to be so much fun. For the initial 6, 7 laps when Leclerc was chasing Norris, I was excited around my seat, but then apparently all in all it was a snooze fest. I'm happy that Lando won the championship, but then the race was I think it Abu Dhabi never delivers a good race. I mean, Brazil has to be the last race at some point. So I think it was just a snooze fest.
Yeah, I fear there are some external factors that probably mean that Abu Dhabi shall remain as the season finale for some time, unfortunately. Alex, what was your opinion? Is it kind of similar to Bilal in your thinking?
Yes, however, I did think that the stint of laps after, the first 6 or 7 laps, around about lap 20, where Yuki Tsunoda and Lando Norris were battling, I thought it was going to be interesting, but then again, it was a bit disappointing. I thought personally that Yuki did enough to, what was it, to get Lando to get off the track, but it's very close. It was fine margins. If Lando would have gone off a bit more, he would have gotten a penalty. So that sort of thing could have decided the championship. But then again, later in the race, Lando would have probably still won anyway, I think, because, yeah, the 5-second penalty, I think, wouldn't have affected it that much because Charles was a bit slow coming into the last couple of laps of the race.
He was a little bit, yeah. We'll talk about Tsunoda's quote-unquote defense on Lando Norris a little bit later because he probably could have done a bit more to back him into Charles Leclerc there and not hold up Charles Leclerc. But there we go. That's the way it worked out, I guess. We did have a bit of strategy variation from the top 3 in the championship as well, which I think added to a bit of intrigue. It was kind of like Qatar in that respect. And we did get some overtaking, of course, when the traffic was being overtaken. Lucy, does that kind of boost this race in your estimations, or are you kind of sharing Bilal and Alex's thinking?
I mean, some of the overtaking was good, especially I think, obviously a lot of the stuff was a DRS train, but obviously you can still look to the midfield for usually some good overtaking. And I think that was still there, at least a little bit. But I think that this race was very much coloured by it being a race of effectively sort of maths. It was a race where the excitement came from working out where people needed to be on the grid and what battles needed to go a certain way for certain results. And so it's quite difficult to tell what came from it being a genuinely very interesting race and what came from, say, for example, Norris being sort of held up in quote marks by Tsunoda. And what was interesting, something like that, because of the fact it could maybe have had championship implications. So I would say, yeah, I don't mind Abu Dhabi as a season finale. I think that I've very much I say got used to it. I've never watched a season where Abu Dhabi wasn't the season finale, but I know that it wasn't always the case. And I agree that I know Interlagos used to be it, and maybe that would provide more exciting racing. But I don't necessarily mind Abu Dhabi as the venue because I think that it's basically on the track to be the season on the calendar to be the season finale. So it's kind of everything about it's built around sort of celebrating winning a championship or something like that, or and donuts in Abu Dhabi is kind of iconic now and things like that. So yeah, to answer basically every sort of layered question and probably muddle my points, it could have been more interesting, but I didn't mind it.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of pains me a little bit that Abu Dhabi has kind of become iconic as the last race. Like you mentioned, the images with the donuts and everything, it's kind of become synonymous with the final race, because I made an ideal calendar one time when I was bored, a 24-round season, and Abu Dhabi wasn't anywhere on the calendar, so I have pretty strong opinions on that. But never mind, we'll move on to the actual events of the race with Lucy's race rundown.
That's right. For the last time of the season, you get to hear my voice and my terrible, terrible attempt at making some jokes. However, firstly, we have Max Verstappen, who really maxed out the number of points that he was trying to get in this last race by finishing top step of the podium with 25. Really just kind of never looked in doubt. There was a bit where it seemed like there might be something going on with strategy. To be honest, I didn't really know what was going on, but there was never really any question of him being under any sort of threat from second place. Oscar Piastri, he finished second. I was about to say he finished second in the championship, but he didn't. He finished third in the championship. In something which is rather annoying to my brain, the top three, who were the same three in the championship and the race, did not finish the race in the order they are in the championship, which I would personally like to make a protest about that, but that's just me. Oscar Piastri took home second. Lando Norris in third place did exactly what he needed to do. This is not by no means any scenario like we've said where, maybe he would have been disappointed because he would have liked to beat his teammate for second. That doesn't matter. He's won the World Championship. I literally don't think anyone cares. Charles Leclerc in fourth for Ferrari. Ferrari actually remembering to be good on these regulations. Immediately way too late, given it's the last race of the season under this current regulations. I was saying while watching this, when it was the case that Verstappen would have won the championship had Leclerc overtaken Norris, that where Red Bull went wrong was needing to rely on a Ferrari to get them a championship. George Russell in fifth. Mercedes were there. He was there. That's really all kind of I have to say on it. He lost quite a few positions at the start. I don't know whether he stalled or just got away very slowly, but that kind of, he maybe could have been in the fight, maybe instead of Leclerc, and that could have maybe done something differently. But as it was, fifth, fine. Mercedes have secured second in the constructors. No surprise there. Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso in sixth, the first of their points finishers in this race. A very solid race from Alonso, who actually drove, I was about to say fast, at a moderate pace for this race. He did not hold everyone up quite as much as maybe he was going to, but he still did, because at the end of the day, it's still an Aston Martin. Esteban Ocon in seventh. We have been singing the praises very much for his teammate recently, so it's good to see Esteban have a good weekend of his own to finish off the season and the regulations for Haas. I think they have a very strong pairing, which going into next year, they will be hoping to, I'm going to say, continue to climb up the midfield, especially with their new partnership with Toyota. They will be hoping that that's maybe start some long-term growth for them. And I can see Esteban Ocon wanting to stick around to be part of that. Lewis Hamilton in P8, compared to his teammate, a little bit of a woeful weekend, but he did score points, so that's something, I guess. Nico Hülkenberg in P9 for Sauber, finishing off the season all right for Sauber. They're not Alpine, which I think is really the main thing to say. 10th place, Lance Stroll actually scored some points along with his teammate. So again, Aston Martin finishing the season strong, and will hopefully next season they'll want to do better than 6th and 10th, but you never really know, do you? Gabriel Bortoleto in P11, fairly close again to his teammate, only a couple of seconds between them because Stroll was within the DRS of Nico Hülkenberg. Stroll was actually, interestingly enough, to jump back to that, the last person to make a DRS-assisted overtake, because DRS is going away next year. Oliver Behrman in P12 for Haas. He was just there. Haas had a fairly average weekend. The midfield's really so close that kind of you can't particularly say that one driver's had a good weekend and one's had a bad weekend, because they finished in 7th and 12th, because there's like 10 seconds between 7th and 12th, and that's really just a strategy or like some overtakes or bad starts worth of time. Carlos Sainz, P13 in Williams, did not end the season out as they hoped. He would have been hoping to be, much like last week, 10 more places up the grid, but I don't care. We got 2 podiums, well, 2.5 podiums this year, and you can fight me on that. Yuki Tsunoda, P14, tried to be relevant, ultimately failed and got a penalty for it, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And yeah, I think I was predicting that he'd have quite a good race to finish off his time at Red Bull, and I am very sad he didn't. I am genuinely quite sad to see him go, and he would be sad to leave on a 14th place. 15th, Kimi Antonelli. If Lance Stroll was the last person to make a DRS-assisted overtake, Kimi Antonelli was the last person to press the DRS button, which doesn't have the same ring as Jensen, first driver to press the DRS button. But, you know, we take it. He was there, again, 10 places behind his teammate. Yeah, Alex Albon in P16 got penalty for, I think, speeding in the pit lane. It was some pit lane infringement. I was annoyed about it. I feel like that's just the life of Williams fan, though. Isaac Hadjar in P17. He had a couple of rough races, but this was more of a general rough weekend for Racing Bulls. He will be seeing how Verstappen drove that Red Bull and hoping he can replicate that next season, and I am hoping so too. Liam Lawson in P18. I'll be, again, just not really the pick of the midfield this race, which makes my predictions age very poorly. And who could have seen it coming? The Alpines are in P19 and P20. Gasly ahead of Colapinto because of course he was. And Gasly also got a 5-second penalty because he exceeded track limits too much, which I think literally nobody noticed, which I fear is the average Alpine experience. Alpine will be hoping to not do that next season. I have to admit, I don't have a lot of faith in them, but no one DNF'd this race, which is nice, especially end of an era, end of a season. You never really want anyone to DNF the last race of the season. It just leaves it on a bit of a sour note. So that's it. That's the race rundown. And now you get an 85-day break before I start waffling again.
Thank you, Lucy. That was great. It's the 24th Grand Prix in history and the 4th this season with no DNFs, I think. 4 this season seems like a lot, but I'm sure unreliability will be back next year anyway with that new era, like you were saying. You also mentioned George Russell and why he had the bad start. I think it was just driver mistake. He just dropped the clutch a little bit too quickly at the start, but he had no pace anyway, so he probably would have finished about there. Okay, let's talk about our world champion. I think that's the biggest place to start, the elephant in the room. It was a McLaren driver, thankfully, because if McLaren didn't win it, I think Bruce would have probably been spinning in his grave like a Pirelli tyre. I don't know. But Alex, I just want to come to you first. What is your reaction and your first thoughts to Lando Norris, champion of the world?
I mean, McLaren fans have surely been holding in their hearts because, of course, Max Verstappen, who was quite frankly in a tractor of a Red Bull this season, and I'll get onto it later because I don't think the Red Bull will be good absolutely at all next season, but that's for a later date. And I think the McLarens, well, they held on, frankly, because I feel like it was a bit stupid that they let Oscar chase down Max. Like, I didn't get that at all, but keeping Lando in P3 was good. I feel like they should have let Lando through because, of course, Oscar didn't really have a proper chance for the championship because, of course, the McLarens were split in the order by Max. So it was more likely that Max would win the championship than Oscar would win the championship. So I think they should have let Lando through, but oh well. I think the championship ultimately came down to, well, Tsunoda just messing it up because I feel like if Tsunoda could have slowed down enough for Leclerc to catch up, I feel like Leclerc could have gotten past Lando. He would have lost confidence and then would have bottled the championship, but I feel like McLaren fans there, because the strategies for McLaren in the past couple of races has not really been ideal, but I feel like Lando did well in the sort of stint of races in the Americas, but then Max just sort of turned in another gear, and I just feel like he didn't have enough races left, and what caused the championship was either Yuki Tsunoda, just being an idiot. I don't want to be harsh on Kimi Antonelli, but I really do feel for him because the championship did eventually come down to, well, the 2 points that Lando gained in Qatar. And yeah, I do feel like Max fans, I mean, I feel sorry for the poor guy because he's only 19. He deserves like all the praise that he's had this season. He had a bad race today, but he finished very good. If we include Abu Dhabi, he had an amazing end to the season. And yeah, that's all I have to say, really.
Yeah, Antonelli, I think it is very unfortunate what happened there, but I think you can point to many moments where Verstappen lost the championship as well, to be honest, as well as many where Norris won it, Bilal. So what's your assessment of Lando Norris being a Formula One world champion and his race on Sunday as well?
I am absolutely happy that Lando Norris won the championship. Coming from a bias as a McLaren fan, I'm really happy. But then, honestly, it did not feel like Lando Norris actually became a world champion as soon as he crossed the line. And also coming to the radio message from Zach Brown, I feel like what was he saying? He's a world champion. Add more passion to your radio message, please. But then how the season unfolded from like this season, this was Max chasing McLarens all the time, and then it was at some points very close that the lead is going to change for the championship, where Oscar was leading the championship of up until the summer break. So I lost hopes in Lando Norris, honestly, after Zandvoort that I don't think he's going to win the championship, but then he managed to come back, managed to see all the hate pass behind him, and then nobody believed in him that he's going to win the championship, but then he proved all of the haters wrong. So I'm so happy about that.
He did indeed prove them very wrong, indeed. Lucy, I want to say Lando Norris, he had quite an up and down season. I think Monaco was the turning point. It's certainly what Norris pointed to as the turning point for him, and putting that qualifying lap in to be on pole. For the other two in the championship, I think the turning point was Monza for very different reasons, but it was the confidence boost that Norris needed in Monaco. And now surely this is going to give him even more of a confidence boost. What did you think about his season and that confidence that he's kind of displayed more recently? And even in the race on Sunday, he was putting some very decisive and confident moves on the traffic to try and make his way through, right? Did that kind of surprise you a little bit that he was so confident in the way that he was sending a dive bomb on Antonelli, for example, or going to the inside on Tsunoda when he was moving in that direction? Did that take you aback a little bit when he was in a championship winning position?
I don't know whether it sort of took me aback a bit. I mean, it was exciting because, to be honest, I thought Abu Dhabi would just be all boring, but it wasn't, fortunately. But I think that it kind of, what it shows is that it's somebody who has like total confidence in the car and who is very at one with the car. Like, we talk about it a lot with Verstappen in that how he's very able to get the most out of the car because he basically kind of knows almost how the car thinks. Like he has total faith in what the car's going to do and where the limit is. And Norris effectively found that. And I think that's maybe why Monaco is very important, because Monaco is a circuit where admittedly it's not as fast as some of the other circuits, but because it's a qualifying circuit, it is very much all about precision and about extracting the maximum from the car in terms of precision. And so in terms of that, I'm not surprised that Norris was able to take that as such a confidence boost, because if you can stick it on pole at Monaco, obviously ahead of all the other drivers, but more importantly ahead of your teammate, then it means that you can extract the sort of effectively, you can get closer to perfection and perfect harmony with the car than your teammate can. And that's kind of very impressive. I would like to say, though, just in response to Alex, I do not think that McLaren should have told Oscar to let Norris pass. I think that was, I would genuinely have been very upset had they done that, because I personally think that would have done a disservice to the fact that Oscar had a very good season. As we've said, Norris was very comfortable in third. There was no question of him losing third to Leclerc, or even if Leclerc put him under pressure, I think the overtakes which we saw Norris do, I have absolute faith that he would have been able to defend those as well. And so I think that it was right that McLaren let the season end the way it did instead of asking Piastri to give up position to Norris, because that just kind of would have left quite, not in terms of like Norris's championship, because obviously he still would have won it in terms of in third, but that would have left quite a bitter taste in the mouth at the end. But yeah, I think that Norris was very in harmony with the car, and that was probably why he was able to extract a lot from it and extract from it more consistently than Piastri was. Because obviously Verstappen ended up being the one who came second in the championship, but because he's not driving the same car, you kind of can't directly compare the two. But Norris, I feel like, Norris and Piastri had the same number of wins. Verstappen had one more win because of Abu Dhabi, but Norris just had like an egregious number of podiums because he was just so consistent in how he was able to like make the car work for a lot of different circuits. And that's just like the only real sort of dip that he had post Monaco. Is Canada post Monaco? There was Canada, but if it was post Monaco, I can't remember what order the season is. But the only real dip that he had that kind of wasn't a mechanical DNF or something was Baku, and Piastri also struggled with that. So yeah, I think it was he was very synergized. I think that's a word. Synergized with the car.
Synergized is a good word, yeah. And even when he wasn't in harmony with the car, he was still getting those podiums, because I think it was also at the time when McLaren had the dominant car. And so even though he was a bit behind Piastri because he wasn't getting the car to his liking, he was still able to finish on the podium. He still did a great job, no doubt, to adapt to the car that he had. And in the end, he worked very hard to turn it around and make it to his liking. But yeah, he did have an incredible number of podiums, much more than Verstappen and Piastri did. Obviously, I do think Norris is quite a unique champion in that you mentioned Canada. He does kind of make those mistakes and then he admits to them, and he doesn't have an unwavering sense of self-belief, but I think overcoming that this season was crucial to his championship. Okay, I was going to bring it back to Alex's point about letting Piastri through on Norris on the first lap. Bilal, I want to get your thoughts on that. Was it a good decision? Was it not? Are you in Lucy's camp, Alex's? Does it make sense to you to allow Piastri through on the first lap to go and chase Verstappen?
I think I'm going to have to agree with Lucy on this side, because Oscar was clearly in fight for the championship. And then up until the last race, he had like an amazing championship run. And then he was also in the contention. So I think it doesn't make sense for Oscar to let go and let chase Max. But then, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it was probably beneficial for both if Piastri was able to chase Verstappen down and get the win. Firstly, for Norris's championship, because he wouldn't have had to finish third if Verstappen had finished second. And also for Piastri's championship, because the best hope for him winning is to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and hope that something happens to Norris, which is ultimately the plan, right? That was all he could do in that situation. And it was basically all that Verstappen could do as well, was run his own race, finish with the win, and just kind of hope that something happened to Norris. Yeah, so about Verstappen, Alex, did you kind of expect him to try something different, or Red Bull to try something different on the strategy to actively influence McLaren's race? Because they were running very independently and they didn't necessarily try the tactics that were talked about beforehand, with the backing up or something with strategy to kind of almost screw them over a little bit. Did that surprise you, or was it kind of as you expected?
Yeah, like you said, don't rely on a Ferrari to win your world championship, because to be fair, just wouldn't really work. And of course, they tried with Tsunoda, but he had one chance at redemption and he kind of failed. So I guess because I think his actions did end up potentially influencing the race, because I know there was like other parts of the season which Max could have improved to win the championship, like let's say Spain, where he dropped 5 positions, could have finished P5, finished P10. But if we're looking at the here and now, what Max has to do to get the championship, I do think that his teammate should have helped out a lot more. And I do think it's like very disappointing that he failed, because of course he has nothing to play for. He's not in contention for 2026. I felt like he could have gone way more riskier. I don't know, perhaps forced him off the track, or like, I mean, I don't want this to be like another crash gate, but like he could have tried to like get his wheels in and like maybe cause like a spinning out or something like that. And then Lando gets back on the track or stuff like that. But because Tsunoda, I mean, yeah, he doesn't deserve his seat, because he could have just no risk whatsoever. He legit, his last race of F1, he could have took all the risks he wanted. He didn't do so.
I don't like the idea that you have to take risks and be willing to crash people out to somehow be deserving of a seat in F1. I agree that Tsunoda could have defended more, but I think he could have defended more sensibly, as in perhaps focus more on trying to extend a gap to Norris so he wasn't an immediate DRS threat in perhaps some of the cornering sections. I don't know the main overtaking risks, but effectively what Tsunoda did was that he left himself vulnerable in like the main overtaking spot where Norris had already been making overtakes, which Tsunoda would have seen in his rearview mirror. And that was the problem, is that he left himself vulnerable in Norris's kind of favourite position to overtake. The problem was not that he should have pushed Norris off the road or caused a spin. If anything, kind of the stewards determined that he tried to do that, and that was why they gave him a penalty. And I think had Tsunoda caused Norris to spin, had Tsunoda forced Norris off the track, or caused some sort of crash, or caused a safety car or something like that, we would obviously be thinking, because presumably then Verstappen would have won the championship, we would obviously be thinking, congratulations to Verstappen on winning the championship. But this would be a very different conversation we would be having. We would not be having the conversation of, wasn't Lando Norris so consistent, and Verstappen really made the best with a bad car, but unfortunately he just couldn't quite get there. We would be having the conversation of, is this another Abu Dhabi 2021? We would kind of, has Norris lost out on the championship that he deserves because of effectively team orders? And so I'm very glad that obviously, perhaps had the stewards deemed that Tsunoda hadn't forced Norris off the track, or more accurately, had Tsunoda not forced Norris completely off the track and Norris had just chosen to overtake off track and Norris had gone some sort of penalty, that would have added an extra layer of interest, because it would have added the interest of him trying to build a gap to Leclerc, which would of course be very exciting. But I'm fundamentally very glad that that's what happened. And this may be me, but I would much rather leave the sport if I were Tsunoda, having tried my best, but also having tried my best and played fair, than leave the sport having secured my teammate a world championship, but knowing I'd fundamentally broken the rules to do so. And again, I'm not an F1 driver, so I can't offer that perspective, but I am happier than had he. I will never say that I would rather Tsunoda have crashed Norris out in order to secure Verstappen a championship. And I don't think even most people who were rooting for Verstappen would have said they would rather that happen.
Yeah, I think we've seen enough controversy around Abu Dhabi to last us at least a few more years without the likes of that happening. And I think Lando Norris has probably had enough of being bullied by Red Bull as well, that he didn't want more. I think the key thing for Tsunoda was probably that he should have just slowed him down more in Sector 3 instead of trying that jink to the left towards the inside on the straight after turn 5. I don't think it was really well advised to try that there. If you look at what Perez did in 2021, obviously that's the obvious comparison we're going to make. It was just a lot more intelligent the way that he went about defending from Hamilton, and also everything, all the tools in his arsenal, tire life, energy deployment, things like that. It just didn't seem like it was that well executed. Bilal, what were your thoughts? Do you think Tsunoda deserved that penalty? Because he didn't get the penalty for forcing Norris off track. He got the penalty for more than one change of direction on the straight leading up to the corner. Do you think that was deserved?
I think initially when Norris was coming up to Tsunoda, Tsunoda was advised on the radio that you need to help Norris up. But then I don't think he realized that Norris is going to catch up to him so quickly. So I think he got a bit like off track, and then he tried what he could, and then he started weaving on the straights, not imagining that he would actually get a penalty for doing that. I think it was a very risky maneuver, and then I think that penalty is totally what he deserved, a 5 second penalty. It it definitely should have not been like this. And then Yuki Tsunoda is an amazing driver, but I think he did not realize that Norris is going to catch up to him so quickly, which made him do like weave on the straights. So yeah, I think the penalty is deserved.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it's possible that Tsunoda just underestimated the effectiveness of Norris's grip coming out of turn 5 and the effect of that DRS to put him alongside Tsunoda. The thing is that penalty that the stewards issued to Tsunoda for more than one change of direction kind of caused a chain reaction of penalties of the same ilk, of more than one change of direction. I think that we didn't really see it. I don't think the TV direction was particularly favourable to the midfield drivers, for example. But there were a lot of penalties in the midfield and a couple for more than one change of direction. Stroll and Behrman got it. Behrman, I think, particularly suffered because there was no car alongside him while he was weaving. He was purely trying to break the slipstream. It wasn't like in Tsunoda's case where he turned and it caused another driver to go off track. It was purely just because he was trying to break the slipstream, which is something that we've seen so many times before, especially even in Abu Dhabi, 2021, right? Sorry to bring it up. Last lap, Verstappen lunges Hamilton, and then he weaves like crazy on the DRS straight. Obviously, there was none, but on that straight to break the toe. And I think it's a perfectly acceptable thing to do for just racing and trying to protect your position. It's when you do it like Tsunoda did, where you kind of force a driver off the track, where I think that becomes more of an issue. So yeah, Behrman kind of came off worse from that. And if you're keeping up with the Behrman penalty point soap opera, he's now on 10 points out of 12, and none of those expire until the 23rd of May next year, after which we'll have already had 6 rounds into the 2026 season. So he's got to be treading on thin ice for sure. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the midfield, because I didn't expect there to be so many rogue results. If you look at the results page, we've got Fernando Alonso in 6th, Ocon in 7th. You could argue Hamilton's a midfield driver now. He made it to 8th. We had a Sauber in the top 10 as well. Bilal, who kind of impressed you most from that midfield gang that we had kind of scrapping for the points? Because it was a proper scrap if you've seen any of the replays.
Esteban Ocon finishing P7, he managed to run quite a good race. He also was quite consistent in his laps, and then he was also overtaking and putting decent amount of pace and finishing P7. So I think Esteban Ocon really stood out. I didn't think he's gonna move his Haas like a tractor. The way the Haas was performing all of the season, finishing in P7 and then finishing on a high. So I think Esteban Ocon really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about for you, Lucy? I guess no one really expected Ocon to suddenly come good in the last race of the season. He wasn't even here last year, if you remember. Alpine decided to kick him out early for Jack Doohan. I'm sure they suspected that he was trying to drive off the pace in order to give Haas a better finish in the constructors, but because they were battling them at the time. But did you what did you make of his performance? Because he was racing pretty aggressively, and this is his best finish now since the Monaco Grand Prix about 16 races ago, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've been saying about Ocon for a little bit, actually, that obviously Behrman's been having a run of very good form, and that we've sort of been saying that Ocon is kind of therefore, I believe Anwar once said that Ocon was dropping off, which I never quite believed, but that's Anwar for you. But no, I think I'm very excited about kind of his good performance. And I think that Ocon is best when he feels like he's able to go and make some kind of actually go for it. Like in part that is that's when he's got kind of full confidence in the car. But in part, that's also when, you know, the way the grid is spread up, you know, that it was kind of a messed up quali, which is why we had sort of slightly funky race results. And Ocon's at his best when it's kind of, there's not everyone sort of 2x2 in order, where kind of there's a bit of a mess in the midfield anyway, and so you can kind of go for it. And I was actually thinking that it's quite similar to Hulkenberg, because for a while, he kind of, after his podium in Silverstone, Ocon doesn't have a podium yet this year, although I'm sure he would very much like to have one. But after Hulkenberg's podium in Silverstone, he didn't actually get any points for a while, and his teammate really kind of took over the point scoring for Sauber. And Haas obviously did a lot better at their point scoring than Sauber because they're above them in the championship. But I kind of see some parallels. They both also had good weekends here, but in the sense that they both sort of went through a little period of being really outclassed by their rookie teammates, but now it feels like it's being back on a level playing field.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that way, but I see where you're going with that. And both in the points on Sunday, of course. Alex, just a word on any of the finishers outside of the top three, really. Who impressed you there? Was it Charles Leclerc and his huge deficit to Lewis Hamilton? Of course, deficit in a positive way. I know it carries some negative connotations. Was it Stroll finally getting another point? Was it, Sauber's coming out of retirement, Nico Hulkenberg to get a point? Where did you see that one? Or even, Alonso in sixth?
I do feel like, it's quite a good mix of drivers, because I sort of saw some drivers have had good stints of consecutive point finishes, like Oliver Behrman. He got points from Singapore all the way to Vegas. Unfortunately, he did get P12, but I feel like Fernando had a good drive. Hamilton, of course, with his quali performance, going all the way to P8 is good, but then again, the Ferrari was a bit better than it usually is. So, yeah, I would probably say these drivers.
Yeah, okay. I think that means it's time to head to our prediction segment. We can pick up another couple of talking points when we go through our predictions, if we feel like it as well. But yes, let's see how well these ones have aged. Lucy, why don't we start with you? Do you have your predictions that you made last week for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix? And how did you do with your poll and P1 to 5, please?
You know how I did with my poll and P1 to 5 because you've also got them written down. I unfortunately do have my predictions here with me, much as I would have liked to burn them and set them on fire. Please just ignore everything I say. I think I've not got 0. I think I've done the maths and I've not got 0. And so that is a win for me. I said Piastri would be on pole. He wasn't. He was in third, so it's kind of close. Said Piastri would get P1. He was in P2, so I get 1 point for that because I was 1 off. Said Antonelli P2. I feel like if you haven't listened to the previous episode, you'll be very confused. This was basically that I just went for kind of whatever a hot mess I could go for to try and get Piastri to win the championship, because I had a bet with Anwar and Daniel that if Piastri won the championship, they had to eat Vegemite sandwiches. And so I was trying to make Piastri win. Unfortunately, I failed. In P3, I said Sonoda. That aged very poorly, but I would have preferred that outcome. I wanted to see him have maybe not P3, because, I am still happy Norris won the championship, but I would have liked to see him have a good end to his F1 career, at least temporarily. Maybe he'll come back at some point, but kind of I doubt it. Maybe Daniel Ricciardo it and Arvid Lindbergh will Nick de Vries it, but I doubt it, to be honest. P4, I had George Russell. He was actually P5, P5, right? So I think that's a point. And then I said Hadjar P5. The RBs were nowhere near where I thought they'd be, but they have had some good races this season, so I still say that it's not that bad.
Thanks, Lucy. Yes, I did know exactly how you'd done because I was staring at your predictions in my sheet and there is a little 1 next to your name. It's very sad, but I am kind of glad because it means no Vegemite sandwiches for myself or Anwar. So thanks for not getting it right there. Bilal, how about your predictions for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix? How did you do?
I think I did fairly decent because I predicted Max would be on pole and then he actually got pole. But for 1 to 5 in the race, I predicted Lando was going to win the race, which he clearly didn't. I predicted that Max is going to be P2, but since Max all won the race, so I get a point. Oscar, I predicted he's going to be P3, but he finished P2, so I got a point there as well. I thought Russell's going to finish P4, but then he actually finished P5, so that's a point there as well. And then I predicted Sainz is going to be in the top 5, and I really wish he would have been in top 5 to end the season on a high, since he's been carrying the Williams team. But then apparently he did not finish, and he did not have the best race. So I lose a point there. I think I did fairly decent.
Yeah, no, you did. It was a good effort indeed. Let me just run through Jasper's predictions, who was on the review for Abu Dhabi last week. Jasper predicted a pole position for Oscar Piastri. Sadly, no. P1 for Max Verstappen, which was correct. 3 points there. And Piastri P2 as well, which is very impressive, getting the top 2, so 3 points each. And Russell finishing on the podium in 3rd, which didn't quite come through. Not enough pace for Russell there. P4, Lando Norris, which is a point because he was 1 position off. P5 for Kimi Antonelli, which was quite a way off because Antonelli kind of fell off this weekend relative to his recent run of form, let's say. I'll go through mine pretty quick. I got pole position Norris, no. P1 Norris, also no. What else did I put? P2 Verstappen, which is a point because I was a position off. P3 Piastri, also a point because I was a position off. And P4 Leclerc, which I was not optimistic about, but apparently that is fine because he finished in 4th, so 3 points there. And I also put Sainz in P5 like you, Bilal, but that didn't come through either. Okay, now onto the fun section, the DNF and random prediction. I wonder if any of us have got any points for our DNF that we've predicted, Lucy.
Yes, I said Verstappen would DNF and he did the opposite of DNF, but oh well. I also said at least 4 drivers would lead the race at some point. That did not happen. I believe we got to 2, which is something. So yeah, I got 50% of that, but no points.
Yeah, no points there, unfortunately. Bilal, how about your DNF and random prediction?
Oh, no points at all. I thought Liam Lawson was going to DNF and crash out, but then clearly he did not. And I thought Max was going to lock up and drop to P5, which apparently he did not do, and he was smooth sailed from turn 1. So I didn't get any points.
Yeah, Max was very smooth sailing on Sunday. Okay, Jasper predicted a DNF for Lewis Hamilton. No, but he did get a Q1 elimination again. And a random prediction was Alonso holds up Norris, which I believe was a kind of a throwback to 2010 and the Alonso Petrov moment. Alonso did do some holding up, I believe, but it was of the midfield drivers, not necessarily Lando Norris. Maybe change that for Yuki Tsunoda. We might have decided to give him the points there, but unfortunately not. And my DNF was Yuki Tsunoda, speaking of the devil, which did not occur. Yeah, maybe got close when he was moving around, doing more than one change of direction on the straight, but it didn't come through. And my random prediction was a Hamilton top 7 finish, which was actually really close to coming in. I don't know if you saw, in the live broadcast, it was in a mini box, but Hamilton did get past Ocon for P7 at one point, but then Ocon re-overtook him at the next section with DRS, and Hamilton was condemned to a P8 finish. So close, yet so far for me, but I'll take it because I didn't think I was going to be that close after Saturday. Okay, that is pretty much it. I just want to get a final thought from each of you about the standings in the championship, the season overall, whatever you want to say. Alex, should we start with you? Your kind of appraisal of the championship fight that we've had, the decider that we've had, and ultimately our champion in 2025.
I feel like the title fight was one of the most interesting ones which I've watched. I mean, of course, nothing will be 2021, but this season actually came really close in the fact that there was a 3-way tie and not a 2-way tie. So I pretty enjoy that. The fact that Max had to lock in so hard and overcame a 100-point deficit after Zandvoort and still managed to catch up is just amazing. And I feel like he did really well in that regard. The McLarens. I would say that Oscar, based on his quali and race form, I got some statistics up. The problem with Oscar was Baku to Las Vegas, qualified 9.3.6.8.4.5, and of course finished retired for 5.55, disqualified. And I felt like that was, like, in terms of the standings for him, his rest of the season compared to that stint, I really did feel like he sort of took a dip of form. He really did improve in Qatar and Abu Dhabi, but it just wasn't enough. Max, of course, Max being Max, he just locked in. I do feel like he could have done better in perhaps Sao Paulo qualifying, but that was his team. He got an amazing set of results after Zandvoort. 1-1, 2-1, 3-3, 1-1-1. And that's the sort of form that a champion would have. But let's get on to the actual champion, Lando Norris, of course, excluding the disqualification in Vegas, which in turn was frankly a team error. After Azerbaijan, 3-2-1-1-4-3. We have consistent podiums, which are sort of aligned with the rest of the season. I wouldn't really say that he had like a stint of badness anywhere. We've got individual races where he just didn't really do amazingly, but he still did well. That being Saudi Arabia and Qatar. We have Baku, where McLaren were just bad, I guess. Las Vegas, of course, I've talked about. Then Canada was his only real mistake. Netherlands was a mechanical failure. So it was just one-offs, not really a consistent run of bad form. And I feel like, to be fair, that worked in Norris's favour because, of course, Max didn't really have a good form in between, I would say, after Imola and before Monza. So in between the two Italian races, we have 4-10-2 retired, 5-4-9-2. And of course, there's podiums in Canada, and I mean, of course, Canada ended on the safety car, so you got the P2, but Netherlands was his home race as well. But in turn, in between the two Italian races, he should have done better. So I would say that Norris deserved the championship purely for the fact that he didn't have a bad run of form. He had individual bad races, and then he got back up, locked in at the right times, and won himself the championship. That's what I have to say.
He certainly did deserve it. Bilal, you said you're a McLaren fan. You'll have been keeping quite a close eye on all this. You know, how lucky were we to see the McLaren duo go head-to-head, and also for Verstappen to be in the mix as well. Maybe it was might have got your heart rate up a little bit, but just what's your appraisal of the scenario?
I think starting off the season, they started on a high note, and then both of the McLaren drivers, I would say, was consistent enough to be on the podiums, and then consistently showing that McLaren is the best car out there on the track. Oscar, I think after summer break, dropped off quite a bit because all of the pressure and all the allegations as to we don't know if there was clearly a favorite or not. But then Lando Norris managed to come up with the pressure, to absorb the pressure, absorb all the hate, and then managed to put in consistently good performances and then win the championship ultimately. For Max, I think after Zandvoort, he clearly thought that there is a contention of the championship, that he can actually grab the 5th world title. So he managed to lock in and then put in the performance. And since clearly he is Max, he managed to do it, and then probably managed to come back and sounded like the greatest comeback of all times. So yeah, I think all in all, the season was quite a thriller, and then I'm happy for Lando Norris that he was consistent enough to win the championship.
Yeah. Lucy, your thoughts?
I mean, I've kind of been on the podcast for nearly every episode, apart from when it gets scheduled at times I can't do, which is your fault. But Okay. And so you've heard most of my opinions throughout the season. We've talked about when drivers have had their bad points and their good points. And so, you know, I think at the end of the day, especially in the championship, there's nothing more to say than congrats to Verstappen for pulling himself back into a championship that really he had no right to be in. Congrats to Oscar, because, you know, we've given him a lot of stick the past few races, but it is only his third season, and I think that kind of you cannot discount that. And obviously, congrats to Lando for winning the championship, for having the consistency to do that. And, you know, it came down to the last race, which was great, but it came down, he never sort of let that stress of it going down to the wire affect him. And, you know, props to him for that, and bring on 2026.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect note to end it on, really. Congratulations to all three of the championship contenders, but especially to Lando Norris, who achieved his childhood dream of becoming a world champion. So that was a little preview of our season review, if you will. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the title fight, because we're doing the season review, which is coming up shortly, a little bit differently. It's kind of like an award show, so watch out for that when it drops. It should be a fun one to reflect on the 2025 season. But that's about it for the Abu Dhabi review. I'd like to thank Lucy, Bilal, and Alex for joining me for this one. It's been a great season, so I'd like to thank everyone listening as well for listening this year, and for this episode as well. I hope you have a great break, and watch out for our season review. See you then, everyone.